At my son's college graduation, I sat among proud families in a sea of cheers and cameras, my heart aching with a blend of overwhelming pride and trembling fear, because the truth was that beneath the layers of joy and success stood a history no one in that room knew, a life forged in shadows, sacrifice, and silence, and my son Daniel, standing poised at the podium, was not just delivering a speech, he was unknowingly standing on the threshold of unveiling the truth I had buried for over 2 decades, a truth so complex, so raw, that I had crafted an entire identity around it to protect us both. I was just 17 when I got pregnant, a high school senior with straight A's, dreams of journalism, and a scholarship offer that had seemed like my ticket out of the small town that always felt too tight for my ambitions. Caleb was 21, charming, reckless, and thrilling in a way that made me believe love was more important than logic. We met at a bookstore. He said something poetic about Bukowski and I laughed, not knowing that laughter would turn to tears. For 6 months we were inseparable, sneaking out, driving to the cliffs at midnight, making love in the back seat of his rusted Buick under the stars. When I told him I was pregnant, the fantasy shattered. He said nothing at first, just stared, then walked out, and within days, he was gone from town entirely. My parents, devout, stern, proud, called me a disgrace. They offered me a clinic appointment and a threat, have the abortion or leave our home forever. I chose Daniel. I remember walking out with nothing but a duffel bag, barefoot, heartbroken, nauseous with morning sickness and dread. I slept on a friend's couch for a month, worked double shifts at a truck stop, wore second-hand clothes that barely fit, and learned to measure life in quarters and calories. I ate ramen for breakfast and counted baby kicks between customers. Every night I whispered apologies to the baby growing inside me, promising him a better life. Labor was brutal. Alone in a county hospital room with flickering lights and peeling paint, I screamed into a pillow and pushed through 18 hours of agony. And then he was there, tiny, screaming, beautiful. The nurse placed him on my chest and I felt something inside me click into place. I named him Daniel because it sounded biblical, like he'd already survived a lion's den just by being born. I told him stories as he nursed, about a father who had died in a tragic car crash, a lie I believed was kinder than the truth. That lie became a thread I wove into every bedtime, every scraped knee, every birthday. I worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, waitress by morning, motel maid by afternoon, gas station clerk by night. I missed school plays and dentist appointments but never a fever or a heartbreak. We moved 6 times before Daniel was 10. Each apartment smaller than the last, each neighborhood rougher. I remember once waking up to the sound of gunshots and dragging him into the bathtub, singing lullabies over his trembling body to mask the sirens. He never complained. He had his father's eyes but none of his cowardice. He was bright, gentle, intuitive beyond his years. At 6 he asked me why God made kids grow up without dads. I told him God had other plans for his father, and he hugged me like he understood. He excelled in school, first in spelling bees, then in science fairs, always coming home beaming, arms full of trophies and eyes shining with pride. He told me he wanted to be someone who helped people. I told him he already was. By high school he was volunteering at shelters, tutoring peers, applying for scholarships I helped him research during my rare breaks. I missed my own youth, but I never regretted it. Once he stayed home from prom because I had the flu, made me soup and watched old movies with me. He never made me feel like I'd held him back. I remember Christmases with no tree, just a few paper stars he cut and taped to the wall, and he told me it looked perfect. I remember birthdays when he gave me coupons for hugs and chores because we couldn't afford gifts, and the way he'd light up every time I called him my miracle. As he grew older, he began asking questions. I dodged them, afraid that unraveling the past would break our bond. Then came his senior year of college, when he sent in a DNA test for fun, to learn about his ancestry. A week later, he found Caleb. Alive. Married. With children. He confronted me with quiet eyes and shaking hands. I confessed. The lie crumbled. He didn't yell. He said, "I get it." But I knew it hurt. I feared I'd lost his trust forever. Then came the graduation. As he stood on that stage, he began not with a quote but with a confession. My mom told me my father died when I was a baby. That was a lie. He left. She raised me alone. She gave up everything. She worked 3 jobs. She made me believe I was loved when we had nothing. She's not perfect, but she's my hero. The crowd went silent, then burst into applause. I wept. That night we sat on the porch of our apartment and he said, "You gave me your life. Let me help you live yours now." I went back to school. I learned to dream again. I painted. I dated. I laughed. And one day, out of the blue, Caleb emailed. He wanted to meet. Daniel said it was my choice. I met Caleb at a diner. He was older, gray at the temples, quieter. He cried. Said he'd made the worst mistake of his life. I forgave him, not for him, but for me. We parted with a handshake and peace. Daniel and I took a road trip that summer, just us, like we used to be. We watched sunsets, ate roadside burgers, sang off-key to 80s ballads. He told me he wanted to adopt one day, to give a child what he had. And I realized, finally, that I had done something right. I had raised a man full of heart. I later finished my degree in creative writing, something I'd abandoned years ago, and began sharing my story anonymously on forums and blogs. Women wrote to me, young girls pregnant and scared, older women who carried secrets like mine, men who finally understood their mothers. My story became more than mine. It became a lifeline. Daniel encouraged me to publish, and so I did, under a pseudonym at first. The book sold modestly, but the messages kept coming. I spoke at schools, shelters, and women's centers. I saw pieces of myself in every trembling voice, every tearful thank you, and each time, I held their hands and said, "You are not alone." Daniel grew into a man I admired. He got his master's in social work, started a nonprofit for children in foster care, and every time he walked into a room, people listened. They respected him. They followed him. He married a kind man named Thomas, and at their wedding, Daniel asked me to walk him down the aisle. I sobbed. They adopted twin girls, and when they handed me the first newborn, I whispered the same promise I'd made to Daniel all those years ago, that I'd love her fiercely, completely, always. Our little apartment became a haven of laughter and tiny footsteps. On weekends, the girls painted beside me, their tiny fingers smudging the canvas. Daniel and Thomas cooked together, sometimes badly, often hilariously. The ghosts of my past no longer haunted me, they sat quietly in the background, no longer in control. I had made peace. With Caleb. With my parents, who had both passed without reconciliation. With the lie. With myself. And when people asked me if I'd change anything, I'd say, not a thing. Because every sacrifice led to this joy. Every struggle shaped this strength. Every lie was born from love, and every truth I finally told was born from the courage Daniel gave me. And even now, years later, when the world feels uncertain, I hold on to one thing: we made it. We made something beautiful out of brokenness. We loved, lost, fought, cried, and rebuilt. And in doing so, we became more than a mother and son. We became a testament to the power of love to redeem, restore, and redefine what it means to truly live.